Hello and welcome to this lesson, which will provide you with an overview of commercial due diligence. After you have finished this lesson, you will be able to, firstly, explain why commercial due diligence is needed, and secondly, explain the typical process steps in commercial due diligence. Firstly, let's begin with an overview of commercial due diligence. This is work carried out by independent third parties, such as management consultants, and helps buyers to assess the value of a potential target and to become aware of any potential pitfalls that could destroy value for the acquirer's shareholders. Commercial due diligence provides a thorough assessment of a target's positioning within its commercial environment. The work covers a wide range of areas related to the achievability of the target's business plan, key risks, and areas for improvement. Commercial due diligence is a forward-looking process, and typical tasks include determining how the market may change because of the transaction and how customers will respond to it. The work also determines what is going to drive value in a transaction and whether that value will be realized or not, and the work should identify and quantify potential synergies between the target and acquirer. The process can also evaluate the target's business model and assess the feasibility of the transaction from a timing, resource, or cultural perspective. This slide shows the typical process steps in a transaction. As you can see, commercial due diligence usually takes place when the deal is being done, through to when the offer is being made. The work is completed before the final bids are submitted. In some cases, particularly in large transactions, commercial pre-due diligence may be conducted prior to any bids being made. There are four main steps in commercial due diligence work. Firstly, to provide an unbiased view on market and target attractiveness. Secondly, to identify buyer-specific upsides and synergies. Thirdly, to check the validity of the asset's business plan and valuation. And fourthly, to assess the feasibility of an acquisition and highlight any potential deal roadblocks. Now let's cover each of these steps in more detail. The first step is to assess the attractiveness of the target's market. Analysis will usually be conducted on market dynamics, customer segmentation, cost drivers, technology trends, and competitive dynamics. You can consult the Introduction to Strategy lesson for examples of the frameworks you can use to conduct such analysis. For example, Porter 5 Forces. Key insights and hypotheses here will focus on whether the target operates in an attractive industry and what the key success factors will be, both now and into the future. Here is an example of target attractiveness, which categorizes individual business units into those with good prospects and those with less good prospects. This is based on how attractive the market is in which the business units are operating and the competitive strength of the business unit in that market. This kind of analysis initiates a thought process about which parts of the business are doing well or could potentially have synergies with other units in the buyer's portfolio. The second step in commercial due diligence work is to identify potential upsides and synergies. The idea here is that the value and performance of two organizations combined will be greater than the sum of the separate individual parts, in terms of both cost savings and higher sales. Synergy potential is hard to quantify up front, so it is always helpful to benchmark the synergies realized in similar transactions if you can, like as shown in the chart. When conducting your synergy estimates, it is important that you differentiate between cost and revenue synergies. Start by identifying possible cost synergy areas, such as the duplication of internal departments like marketing. Then simulate how a merged entity could operate and with which resource requirements, to estimate the synergy savings. And when it comes to revenue gains, then factors such as multi-product bundled offerings or a single sales team cross-selling to drive market penetration can lead to synergy benefits. You will cover cost and revenue synergies in more detail during the next lesson. Here you can see a checklist for the kind of synergy buckets used in commercial due diligence, from research and development to purchasing, marketing, and internal IT systems. Note that not all categories will apply to the transaction you may be working on. The third step in commercial due diligence work is to check the validity of the asset's business plan and valuation. Regardless of whether you are on the buy side or sell side, it is your role to closely challenge the assumptions in the business plan and propose adjustments to make a more realistic case. The seller should usually grant access to senior executives and business sites for you to gain, at first hand, a deeper understanding of the organization, including its cost and revenue drivers, and any production or research and development facilities. It should also allow you to address any specific questions or concerns which have surfaced during the due diligence process. With this new insight, you should be able to challenge the current business model and its underlying planning assumptions. Once you have challenged the current business model and its underlying planning assumptions, and convinced management with a realistic and defensible case, then you should be able to replace the base business plan with the challenged values. If most of your work is buy-side advisory mandates, you would normally adjust business plan downwards and vice versa. If you are working on sell-side advisory mandates, you would normally adjust business plans upwards. The slide shows an example of how you could present a realistic and defensible case to management based on your challenged values. A waterfall chart is an effective way of summarizing the progression from the original management base case through to the revised base case, showing the cost or revenue categories that are driving the difference. You would need more detail behind each category to justify your challenges. And lastly, the fourth step in commercial due diligence work is to assess the feasibility of an acquisition and highlight any potential deal roadblocks. This is the more subjective and open-ended part of commercial due diligence, but is likely to cover the subjects shown on the slide. For example, whether the timing of the transaction is right, whether any cultural fit concerns are apparent, and whether any other bidders may enter the fray. The selection very much depends on the individual circumstances of the transaction taking place. One of the elements of deal feasibility relates to timing. The timing of an investment can influence future value creation. Therefore, the optimal time to conduct a transaction is often when the target is not engaged in any value-creating activities. For example, when the target is not streamlining its portfolio structure, not developing any new markets, or not executing any new marketing and sales strategies. The slide shows some of the factors you can consider regarding the timing element of deal feasibility. In summary, commercial due diligence concerns the investigation of a business prior to signing a contract and allows the buyer to evaluate the attractiveness of an asset by an independent third party. The four main steps in commercial due diligence work look at the market and target attractiveness, synergies, checking the validity of the asset's business plan, and finally, assessing the feasibility and risks in an acquisition. Thank you for participating, and see you next time on another exciting business training lesson from Pontema.